Hi everyone, this is Kyoungeui from the Expressing Us website. Today, I'm going to argue about why the Korean education is one of the best education in the world. Before going to the main topic, what do you initially think about the Korean students? What do you come up with them? Well, you might think about a person who is very good and maybe the genius in mathematics, or a group of students who are very smart and focuses in class and academically talented. Well, I don't think the reason the Korean students are smart and good at academic things is not because they are naturally talented, but the Korean education enables them to be one of the world's most competent students. The merit of Korean education is largely three in my perspective. The first is learn and apply method. The Korean education encourages Korean students to deeply apply what they have learned based on memorization and understanding. So for example, when the Korean students learned about differentiation or anti-differentiation, then the actual test will require them to solve a graph, give a graph and solve it using these basic concepts. So Korean education requires them to deeply apply what they have learned. Second is academic-led environment. Well, very different in United States school, well, where I go to. My school starts at 8 o'clock and finishes 2:36. But the Korean school, it starts at 7:30 and ends at 4:20, which gives the Korean teachers to have a more opportunity and absolute more hours to teach the Korean students to learn deeply and about the subjects. Also, we have a self-directed learning, one of the unique system in Korean school. The Korean students could stay as long as 10 p.m. to review what they have learned, or the Korean teachers could teach them about the subjects that they learned today, that day, more deeply. And lastly, but most important thing, the Korean has one of the most highest difficulty SAT test. So this, at the presence of difficult test, motivates the Korean students to actually focus on study. And lastly, the systemic private education. Korea has a rich and high quality private education. So it starts with like Korean, math, these are basic things, but we also have taekwondo, piano, art, guitar, all those things that Korean students could desire. If they want to learn those things, we have private education that could fit what they need. Also, we also have an excellent internet lecture system. So just in the computer and in their home, they could have very well set information and they could study the Sunung, which is the highest difficulty SAT test. And compared to the United States, which is very expensive, Korea has a cheap price of these education. I think Korea is one of the country that you could learn violin and taekwondo costs all like $100 just in a month. But there are some opposes to the Korean education and like some very problems about Korean education. The first problem that many people think is a pressure from excessive zeal for education. Well, I admit this is a problem for the Korean education, that students got forced to study more, and this eventually leads to the depression and the pressure for them. But however, this is one of the unique atmosphere of Korean society. Like United States have invisible discrimination against colored race. We have a we have a very unique atmosphere that forces students to learn and to study. But this should be gradually solved. But Korea is a very small country with not very much natural resources. And the one thing that Korea people could success is being academically advanced. So I think this is inevitable. Second is lecture-based education, and Korean doesn't have any physics class, like phys ed class or art classes. But this is not true. Korea education provides various science experiments and very well established art and sports classes. Also, during the lunchtime, we could go to the field and play soccer with our friends. And during the summer, we have a school competition of soccer that many people could enjoy. And lastly, compulsory education with no option. Well, this is partially true comparing to the United States. The Korea has a narrow range of subject that they could select. But that doesn't mean that we all have a required subject and the Korean teacher just assign students. We still have selective courses. For example, when I was in Korea, I was told to choose two subjects from the four scientific subjects, which is physics, chemistry, biology, and earth science. And I could also have opportunity to choose my third language. Are you gonna choose Japanese or Chinese? We still have selective courses that defends the freedom to choose what they want to learn. Well, in conclusion, I think Korea is still has one of the best education and provides very nutrient studies. Firstly, we have excellent education method, which is deeply apply what you have learned, the basic concept, and promote them into the more complicated circumstances. Secondly, we have advanced educational environment. We could stay till 10 and we have a very difficult SAT. So Korean students are constantly motivated in those 3 years, and eventually we could achieve like the academic achievements. And lastly, efficient private education. So all of these adds up into the great strength of the Korean education. And for in my personal view, I have experienced like 2 years of Korean education and 2 years of American education. Although the American education was also hard, but I think I think the Korean education enabled me to successfully adapt to American education system and gradually become one of the highest students. Thank you for listening.